We're joined again by Michael Lima Cuadra, founder of Democratic Space and the Canadian representative for the Council of Democratic Transition in Cuba. Michael, before the break, I was asking why now? Why this generation? Why have they seemed to be able to break through with their political protests? Why haven't we seen a previous generation do that? Or maybe they have, and we're just not aware of it.
I think we have to go back to 2018 when the San Isidro artist movement started and they began using the internet. That was a major issue in how they communicated with young people through the internet, so social media. That's when in Cuba there was a crack in the wall and people started having access to cell phones and internet. So I might point out to 2018 because that's when a crusade against censorship started in Cuba. Mm-hmm. San Isidro movement started because an article in the Constitution, 349, officialized censorship in Cuba, which really existed for the past 6 decades, but that article made it official. So they were the first one to reach out across civil society, environmentalists, human rights activists, journalists, and they broke the pattern of the human rights movement. In the past, it was just groups, intellectuals, and they reach out to all sectors of society. I think that was the starting point. They started to do public protests across cities. Mm-hmm. The founder, Luis Manuel Otero, who is now in prison in Cuba in bad conditions, he started this movement and started to reach out to others and do all sorts of public protests against the 349 along with other artists.
And a lot of these protesters are youth. They're, under 25. Some as young as 14 have even been arrested. Am I right?
Yes. There were, as of today, there are 500 people remain arrested in Cuba, and of that amount, around 326 range between 14 and 30 years of age. So it was a rebellion of youth. Most of the younger generation said enough and understood that the system had to change. In order for Cuba to improve, Cuba needs democracy, free elections, which have been absent for the past 6 decades.
Yes.
Cuba is the longest dictatorship in Latin American history, and behind China and North Korea, among the longest lasting worldwide.
And they have the most political prisoners in prison, when July 11th
On July
happened.
11th, yes. More than 1,000 political prisoners, more than Venezuela and Nicaragua combined just in one day. So the police was on the street picking up younger people and sending it to a prison for just filming what was happening, for walking in the wrong place, or for taking part in the protest, which was mainly peaceful.
Yes.
It's a human right.
It wasn't a violent protest.
No, not at all. It might have been just one incident of violence, and perhaps it might have been fabricated by the regime because the Cuban regime wants to portray the dissidents and the opposition as violent.
They want to justify the crackdown.
Exactly.
Right.
But Cuba now has the most peaceful opposition in history. There has never been a more peaceful opposition in Cuban history than today. Wow. The younger generation believes that Cuba needs a transition peacefully with free elections.
You mentioned that people were picked up, these young youth were picked up, perhaps they were marching peacefully. Some were just innocently bystanding. And one such was a Cuban Canadian, Kerry Abedin. He's only 19 years old. And what did he do?
He was just shouting in a street corner after being in his apartment because of COVID. He'd been there for a month or more. So he decided to go on the streets on July 12th, a day after the July 11th protest, just to chat with a friend in a street corner, very close to where he lives. And the police accused him of throwing a stone, and crack the windshield of a police car. He didn't do that. He's a peaceful young student, brilliant in school.
Wow.
So they went around the neighborhood looking for the first person they could blame, and they found Michael Kerry and sent him to prison, put him there for the past 3 months. Most of that time have been isolated. His mother, whom I'm in contact, she saw him first 2-3 weeks ago. He was not able to see him for more than 3 months.
Right.
Only phone calls with 1 minute limit from prison. In prison, he got sick, got COVID-19. He was not properly treated for it. He got hepatitis. Well, he's yellow, so we assume might be hepatitis.
Right, there's something going on with the liver.
Yes, something going on with the liver. He has herpes, and Doctor just saw him last
So he
week.
caught herpes in prison.
He got herpes in prison. There's all sorts of infections in prison. And in
Wow.
prison, you have to buy pretty much everything in Cuba. You have to pay for water. You have to exchange things like.
So it's not like Canadian prison.
No. It's a terrible place, and there's violence in the prison. In that prison where he's held at, which is called the Western Youth Prison. There are prisoners charged with murder, rape.
So it's a whole mess.